The Vibe 105. I'm Fatima Husain, and today we're discovering Saladin Allah. Saladin is an educator, activist, descendant of a freedom seeker, and a community liaison at the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center in New York. He recently featured in the CBC documentary Secret Agents of the Underground Railroad, uncovering an incredible piece of Black history. Thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you as well, Fatima.
The documentary Secret Agents of the Underground Railroad showcases a focal point for the North American Black resistance movement. Now, in particular, it uncovers the long buried secrets of the Cataract House Hotel. For our audiences, could you briefly talk about what the significance of this chapter is in North American Black history?
Wow. So when you think about the Underground Railroad network, you're talking about a resistance movement. You're actually talking about one of the first human rights movements within North America. Cities like Niagara Falls, New York, Buffalo, New York, all of these border towns actually represented sanctuary cities of the past and were instrumental in establishing some of the most active Underground Railroad networks, because when you think about freedom seekers taking their journey from the South, once they arrived to the North, it was literally one river for them to cross to get to the Canadian side. So the communities that were in these border cities were vitally important in terms of helping freedom seekers get across to the Canadian side.
I've only recently learned about the literal life and death dramas that happen there at an upscale hotel on the American side of the border.
They served 5-course meals. They had marble fireplaces. It was an experience for people.
It was called the Cataract House. And inside,
It's like a spy story.
a secret resistance cell rescued enslaved people.
Cecilia and her silent guide slipped out the garden gate.
Success lay in secrecy.
Now archaeologists are digging deep to bring these legendary stories back to life.
Now, this was a second dig at the site of the Cataract House, and you were present in the space. So talk to us about your experience, perhaps reimagining or invoking the intense stories of the many hopeful enslaved people who used the site as the ultimate passage to freedom.
Well, one thing I think it's important for people to understand is when you talk about archaeology, that was a very exclusive profession when you look at the origins of it, and it wasn't necessarily scientifically based. These were primarily white men who were affluent, and they would oftentimes travel to areas and invest in excavations and basically take items home for their cabinets of curiosity, and they were oftentimes used as conversation pieces for dinner parties. And in terms of the surrounding community, indigenous communities, or some of the people who had the history in these sites, they weren't involved in these processes. So the archaeological dig that we had in Niagara Falls was community-led, and it was inclusive in a way that the profession traditionally has not allowed. And because of that, our community itself had not only a voice, but an interest, as well as controlling the narrative on the stories that are connected to the various different artifacts that were found at this site. So being involved in that process myself as a community member and having other community members involved in this process was exciting. And it was something that we also were able to share with our other family members and colleagues.
Unearthing the remnants of this Cataract House Hotel, not only will it allow us to rethink history that has been buried for many years, but it also gives us a sense of pride, knowing that our city was a place that people came in order to obtain freedom.
So prior to this reveal of the importance of the Cataract House, as a historian, how much of this knowledge was preserved in history books or made known to the general public?
Well, history is exactly what it is. It's his story, and it's usually not our story, and it's definitely not the story. And because of that, when you come from communities who have been historically marginalized, oftentimes our stories are also marginalized, and the things that are important to us, our principles, our values, objects that we've left behind as a part of our legacy are not the primary narrative that you oftentimes learn. Whether you're going through the educational system, whether you're turning on social media or television, our stories are just simply not told. And being invested in projects like this gives us an opportunity to actually not only share our story and the story, but to control the narrative in a sense where years from now, when people want to get an accurate account of who the people were in this place and what was important to them, that they would be reading our words and our stories and not the stories of someone who wanted to take that type of narrative and reinforce superiority identity.
Absolutely. Now that a crucial part of Black history has been revealed, what are the next steps to preserve it and to follow up on the information that we currently have?
So one part is to build upon the foundation that we've established. Having this particular excavation, it also gives other people an opportunity to get involved in a process like this. With the site of the Cataract House, it was massive. It took up the size of about a square block, and we only were able to dig a certain location of that site. So this is something that serves as a foundation to build upon. And the stories that we've been able to reveal, especially through this documentary, Secret Agents of the Underground Railroad, will get more people interested in how they could actually assist in not only unearthing some of these stories here, but other stories that exist of marginalized communities in various different places.
Now, I know you touched on it rather earlier into the interview today, but this project is seen as an important shift in the narrative that encapsulates the very science of archaeology. So why did it take so long for this site, the site that was burnt down in 1945, to, and why did it take a community-led effort to actually dig into the history, the lost Black history that lay there for so many years?
Well, for one, interest. Sometimes people are not really even interested in stories like this. So in order for us to even add value to the importance of these stories, we had to be interested in it to begin with. Secondly, you have to have finances in order to do an archaeological dig. So there were many different moving parts to it. And two of the primary parts of that process is you have to have a value for this type of history and these stories, and you have to be able to create those type of strategic partnerships and finances of people who are also interested and see the value in these stories, so that you can do this with a form of collective work and responsibility.
Absolutely. You are the third great-grandson of the famed Underground Railroad freedom seeker, Reverend Josiah Henson, who was used as the primary narrative for the famous novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. And you've stamped your own legacy today through your inspirational work and, the empowering things that you do. As an active historian, what obstacles do you currently face that reflect the challenges encountered by those in your family that came before you?
Wow. So one of the things is you are entrusted with that legacy and those stories of your ancestors. And I'm not just talking about me personally, but everyone is entrusted with the stories and the contributions of their ancestors. When you have a famous ancestor, such as I do, there is a greater responsibility to carry on the type of contributions that they have made, not only to this society, but to humanity as a whole. There's many of the same type of obstacles that I face here in North America when you're dealing with segregation. And I say segregation in a sense where it may not be legally on the books, but the same type of attitudes that people have had with the othering of their citizens, or the xenophobic type of attitudes that people have that we can just look on the news and see on social media, even to this day, are the same type of obstacles that my third great grandfather faced at that time. But he was the type of person that persevered And the fact that I can utilize his life as a living testimony and know that that possibility actually exists within me as well, it not only keeps me progressively thinking, but it also inspires me to know that I do have the capacity to make change in the same way that he did. Unfortunately, there are a lot of things that we still have to overcome and challenges that we need to meet. But when you look back at your ancestors and some of the triumphs that they were able to overcome and challenges that they were able to meet, you're also able to access a blueprint that you can utilize today on how to navigate some of those same challenges that they had to face.
Coming back to the documentary, what is it that you're hoping the audiences will take away from the secret agents of the Underground Railroad?
One of the first things that I think people should take away from this is the power of everyday people to do extraordinary things. I think a lot of times when we think about heroes or we think about people who have made their mark in history, that sometimes people don't realize that you have those same people in your family. And when you talk about John Morrison, who was the head waiter at the Cataract House, who was able to successfully orchestrate one of the most sophisticated Underground Railroad networks that we have ever seen, and his staff members, James Patterson, William Hamilton, a lot of the various different members of his staff, these were everyday people doing extraordinary things. So willfully, people are able to see themselves in the acts and the deeds of not only freedom seekers of the past, but to understand the universality of the phrase freedom seeker, that we still have people today who still have not accessed freedom. And it is our responsibility to be the type of upstanders as well as instigators to ensure that people are able to obtain their freedom.
Absolutely. So when and where can our audiences watch the documentary?
So Attraction, Black Screen Office, and CBC are hosting a free screening of The Nature of Things, Secret Agents of the Underground Railroad. Is going to be on Thursday, February 23rd at 6:30 p.m. at the Hot Docs Ted Rogers Cinema. It's free, but people are going to have to reserve their seats. And then following the screening, we're going to have a very lively discussion and a question and answer panel that's going to be moderated by the office executive director and co-founder of the Black Screen Office, Joan Jenkinson. And on that panel is going to be not only myself, but the director, Adrian Callender, who's phenomenal at the work that he does. Also, Anthony Morgan, who was the host and the future co-host of The Nature of Things. And then Richard Jean Baptiste, who is the executive producer. So we're going to have a exciting discussion. People have an opportunity to meet us and also ask questions about things that they may be interested in knowing after viewing this phenomenal documentary.
Sounds wonderful. Saladin, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you as well.
Not only will it allow us to rethink history that has been buried for many years, but it also gives us a sense of pride, knowing that our city was a place that people came in order to obtain freedom.